Another rule change in the 2020 basketball rule changes involves the score sheet, and to be exact, this change adds new text to clarify how a coach is penalized if he leaves the bench area, the team bench area, and also when he is actively involved in the fight. Now, in the rule changes, the new wording clarify what happens and how the information is inserted in the score sheet when a technical or disqualifying foul is called against the head coach, the assistant coach, a substitute, an excluded player, or some other accompanying delegation member, when these persons leave the team bench area and then may even not assist the referees in trying to calm down the situation, or even if they are actively involved in the fight. In fact, after 2018, the rules had stated that when a head coach leaves the team bench area during the fight and starts also to be actively involved in the fight, we had a curious situation where this head coach was charged with 2 disqualifying fouls, with 2 D2s, one for leaving the team bench area and one also for his active involvement in the fight. And we had also a situation where the other team got 4 free throws for this single disqualification of the coach. Now, with the new rules, the head coach, if he enters into the court, does not assist the referee and even actively becomes involved in the fight, now the head coach will be charged with 1 disqualifying foul, as we're going to see here on the screen. In fact, this is the FIBA slide that was presented to explain these changes. I'm going to take the same source, this is a FIBA slide, and expand it a bit better so that you could see better on the screen. And let's look first at the situation, as you could see on the screen, where we have situations of the head coach and the assistant coach, or the assistant coach involved in the situation. First, we're going to have a look to the left side of the screen in situations where the head coach or the assistant coach or both go onto the court during a fighting situation and do not assist the referee in order to calm down, to diffuse the situation. Therefore, if we look first when this happens in the case of the head coach, if the head coach enters the court and does not assist the referee, that would be a direct disqualification of the head coach, which is entered, as you could see directly on the score sheet, with a D2 followed by FF in the other boxes on the score sheet. The F signified a fighting situation. The penalty, as you could see, would be 2 free throws and possession for the opposing team. If the assistant coach does the same thing, but he is the only person that does the same thing, therefore the assistant coach goes on to the court during a fighting situation and does not assist the referees to calm down the situation, as you could see, the assistant coach would be disqualified, shown as a D on the score sheet, as you are seeing on the screen, and then a technical foul, an indirect technical foul, bench B2, is given to the coach. Why? Because after all, the head coach is the person responsible for all the personnel on the team bench, and therefore he is responsible for the fact that the assistant coach entered onto the court and did not assist the referees. But as you can see, in this situation, we have just 2 free throws as penalty. The penalty is only 2 free throws, which is 1 for the bench coach technical foul, for the bench B2 coach foul, technical foul, shown on the score sheet. If both the head coach and the assistant coach, both of them, do not assist the referees to calm down the situation, both these persons will be automatically disqualified, as you could see, D for the assistant coach and D for the head coach, but the penalty will constitute only of 2 free throws, there's 1 D2 there for the head coach and a simple D for the assistant coach, and the penalty in such situations when the coach or the assistant coach or both enter onto the court during a fighting situation and do not assist the referee, the penalty will always be 2 free throws and possession for the other team front court with 14 seconds on the clock. Now let's look when we have situation when these persons, the coach or assistant coach or both, are actively involved in the fight, and let's see the difference here. This is shown on the right hand side of the screen here. In the first situation, if the head coach actively involves himself in the fight, what's going to happen is a direct disqualification. D2 penalty would be 2 free throws for this coach, automatic disqualification for actively involving himself in the fight, and possession. If only the assistant coach actively involves himself in the fight, we would have his direct disqualification, and now this would be shown on the score sheet as a D2. Why? Because he is actively involved in the fight now. He is not just merely not assisting the referee as in the previous example, but now he is actually taking part, actively involved in the fight. Therefore, that would be a direct disqualification for this assistant coach, and the coach would be given a B2 technical foul. Why? Because he is, as I said before, he is ultimately responsible for all the personnel on the team bench, and therefore he will also be given a technical foul for not controlling his personnel on the bench. Therefore, here we would have a penalty of 4 free throws, 2 for the direct disqualification of the assistant coach and 2 for the bench technical foul, B2. Therefore, here we would have 4 free throws and possession. If both the head coach and the assistant coach are actively involved in the fight, the difference here would be that whereas like before the assistant coach would be shown a D2 on the score sheet, now the coach, because also himself or herself was involved in the fight and was active involvement in the fight, this would be a direct disqualification also of the head coach, and the penalties here is also 4 free throws, 2 for the automatic disqualification of the coach for actively involving himself or herself in the fight, and 2 free throws for the disqualification automatic of the assistant coach. Therefore, taking these scenarios, you could see the difference here. The rules also talk about other personnel. Remember that nowadays on the bench, apart from the coach and the assistant coach, there could be a possible 14 other persons on the bench, 7 substitutes or excluded player if the player has been excluded with 5 fouls, and also another 7 team delegation members. Could be the second assistant coach, could be the physiotherapist, could be a doctor, could be the manager, could be maybe an injured player who is not listed on the score sheet but is wearing casual clothes and is on the bench, where all these team members on the bench are under the responsibility always of the head coach. But let's see what happens if some of these persons, apart from the coach and the assistant coach, are involved or enter into the court during the fight. Again, we have a FIBA slide which you are seeing on the screen. I have amended it slightly to show it in a larger format so that we could discuss this in more detail. Let's look at one situation here where 2 substitutes, therefore 2 players that still can enter to play into the game, and an excluded player, a player who has committed 5 fouls, notified here as player 10, as you could see. Okay, sorry, player number 11, sorry. Okay, with 5 fouls there. 2 substitutes and 1 excluded player enter into the court during a fighting situation, and they find themselves onto the court. Now here, as you may know in the rules, nobody apart from the coach and the assistant coach is allowed to enter onto the court during a fighting situation. I repeat, nobody except the coach and the assistant coach. And even here, these 2 persons, the coach and the assistant coach, are only allowed on the court during a fighting situation only to assist the referees. If we, like we saw before, if these 2 persons, one or both, do not assist the referees, they would be automatically disqualified. Now let's see what's happening here when 2 substitutes and 1 excluded player enter into the court. That would be a direct disqualification for all these team members. Therefore, you could see a D here for player 7, a D here for player 10. Both these players could still play in the game. They were substitutes, but now they become automatically disqualified. Also here on the score sheet following the D, we find an F on the score sheet to signify that these players were disqualified during a fighting situation, whereas player number 11, who had already 5 fouls, there will be a D in the empty space next to the 5th and final foul, followed by an F. Therefore, the 3 players here will be disqualified, and the coach would be given an indirect technical foul, a B technical foul, a B2 technical foul. Why? Because the coach, as we said before, is directly responsible for the team members on the bench. But as you could see, the only penalty in such situations when team members from the bench enter into the court during a fighting situation, that would be only 2 free throws, which come about from the B2 technical foul given to the coach. However, if we go to the other side of the screen, and we assume that these 3 players, P7, P10, and P11, actively involve themselves in the fight, therefore not only do they enter into the court without authorization, but now also actively involve themselves in the fight, now the situation is far different. Why? Because now, apart from the fact that each one of these 3 players is disqualified, now the penalty for actively involving himself or herself in the fight comes also with 2 free throws. That would be a D2 penalty. As you could see, player number 7 here would have a D2 because there was active involvement in the fight. Player number 10, D2. Player 11, also D2. Apart from the fact that the coach will always receive an indirect technical foul, a B2 technical foul, for not controlling his team members. Therefore, in this situation, we would have a penalty of 8 free throws and possession for the other side. Okay, therefore, this would be 8 free throws. Of course, usually in fighting situations, there would also be maybe members from the other team that are also involved in the fight, and we might have also cancellations of penalties. Remember that on the score sheet, whenever 2 penalties from opposing teams are cancelled, we show them by writing a small c, for example, DC, for example, here on both teams. Okay, C stands for cancellation of penalties, but let's not talk about that. Let's just assume that it's just these 3 players that were actively involved in the fight. Therefore, in such a situation, the other team would receive 8 free throws plus possession in the front court with 14 seconds on the clock. Also, let's talk about what happens if a team delegate member, okay, therefore one of those possible 7 team delegates on the bench, the physiotherapist, the doctor, the injured player, okay. As you know, these persons are normally not listed on the score sheet, but they need also to be disciplined for entering into the court. Therefore, let's take a situation here where one of these delegation members enters into the court. Let's assume that an injured player who's wearing casual clothes is on the bench as a delegation member during the game, and this injured player during a fighting situation enters onto the court. As I said before, in such situations only 2 persons can enter into the court, the head coach and the assistant coach, and only to assist the referee. Therefore, the fact that this injured player entered onto the court, this would mean that this injured player would also be disqualified. But as you know, this player or these persons are not listed on the score sheet, and we have to show their disqualification somewhere. And how is this done? This is done by writing a B next to the head coach area on the score sheet, a B which shows the disqualification of the additional delegation member on the bench. And as you could see, this B is circled. We would have to circle the B. What does that B circle mean? And I will explain that in a moment. Apart from this B, the head coach would also be given an indirect technical foul as normal. Why? Because he is responsible for all the members on the bench. Therefore, the disqualification of the injured player will also lead to an indirect technical foul for the coach, a B2 technical foul. And then we have the B, the circled B on the score sheet, which signifies the disqualification of the injured player. The circle around the B indicates that that B does not constitute as one of the summation of the head coach technical fouls. As you know, in the rules, the head coach would be disqualified if he receives 2C, 2 direct technical fouls, or a summation of 3 bench technicals, 3 indirect technicals, 3 Bs. Okay, but in this case, that circle around the B is indicating that that technical foul does not tally up with the coach's summation as regards disqualification. In fact, if we look at the bottom example, if 2 delegation members enter onto the court, what happens? And they just enter onto the court, they do not involve themselves in the fight, they enter in the court. The mere fact that they entered into the court would lead to their disqualification. Each one of these disqualifications would be shown on the score sheet as a circle B, apart from the fact that there would also be the B2 technical foul, indirect technical foul for the coach. As you could see, there's B2, B, and B. The penalty here, as before, as in the case of the coach and assistant coach, also in such situations, will still be 2 free throws and possession for the other team. But you might say, but aren't there 3 Bs written on the head coach area and the score sheet? Yes, but those 2 circled Bs, as I said before, would signify the disqualification of each one of those 2 delegation members, do not tally with the summation of technical fouls for the disqualification of the coach, and therefore technically in that situation there's only one technical foul for the coach, the B2 foul, which is shown on the score sheet. If the delegation members enter into the court and then also actively involve themselves in the fight, therefore they take part in the fight, the situation changes a bit. In the first instance, if the injured player, if our friend, the injured player, actively takes part in the fight, he will be disqualified. But now, because he was actively involved in the fight, his disqualification will be shown on the score sheet as a B2, not a simple B, a B2. 2 free throws as penalty for the active involvement in the fight, apart from the fact that the coach will still receive an indirect B2 for not controlling his team members from not entering onto the court. Again, the B2, which is therefore the disqualification of the injured player, is circled, and again that circle indicates that that particular technical foul, although it is written in the head coach's row and column and there, that particular B2, the circled one, does not tally up with the head coach's summation of fouls for disqualification. The same thing happens if we have 2 delegation members who enter onto the court and actively involve themselves in the fight. Again, each one of them is disqualified. Each one, his respective disqualification is shown as a B2 in the head coach's row. Therefore, each disqualification also has a penalty of 2 free throws for every disqualification, 2 free throws for this disqualification, 2 free throws for this disqualification, apart from the fact that there will also be 2 free throws for the disqualification, for the indirect technical foul on the coach, the B2 coach technical foul, because he did not control his team members from entering into the court. Therefore, in this situation, apart from the fact that the two members will be disqualified from the game, the penalty for the opposing team would be 6 free throws and possession. Therefore, I hope that now you have a better idea of how these disqualifications of technical fouls are also administered also on the score sheet. I hope things are clear, especially about the circled Bs, which I spoke about in the latter part of this short presentation. I hope you have more idea now, and I hope you found this material helpful for the coming season.